Welcome to the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast. This is the Identity and Influence Podcast here with Dr. Lem. And Dr. Lem, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you again for having me on the show. Really looking forward to unpacking some of this stuff. I called it Lead Smartly because I guess I led dumbly for so long. I don't even know if that's a word. I was just such a dumb leader, like growing and learning. And so the focus of Lead Smartly has to do with, the balance of when to lead and when to take a step back in leadership. A big piece a big piece of this is insight that I got from group dynamics and group development. So if you think about it, if you're a leader, you lead a team or a group. This researcher, Tuckman, he has a model, and in his model there are levels of group development. So right at the beginning is forming, second level is storming, third level is norming, fourth stage is performing, and then the last stage is adjourning. And so whenever a project starts and then whenever you have something new that you're doing as a group, you get excited about it, right? Forming. And so there's some excitement about what it is that you're doing. And then once excitement wears off, you move into the next stage called storming, stage of conflict and competition where personalities converge. This is the most difficult stage, and this is the stage where as a leader, you really need to assert the most leadership, right? You need to wield the most power during this to kind of keep everything going, and keep everything together. Some groups, they just get stuck at this conflict and competition. They challenge each other and they challenge your leadership, and you really need to step up in the stage. And then norming is when the group enjoys being together. And in norming, like, because they enjoy being together and doing the team thing, they are, as a leader, you can kind of step back because they're enjoying each other. Then when you move to performing, that's the stage where the group works independently and the most productive. And so you can really mess up your team if you assert your leadership where they're supposed to be performing. You know what I mean? Think about this as a swim coach, right? At the beginning of the year, everyone's excited, right? And when everyone's excited, you can just kind of step back because the excitement carries the team. Then storming is when they start, the personalities come out and they start challenging your leadership. There starts to be conflict. That's when you really need to step it up as a leader to kind of keep everything together. Norming is when when they're working together. Performing, you're just kind of tweaking here and there. You know what I mean? You should have done all your coaching during practice. It's all mindset and getting them ready for performing. And so you're not really leading there. You're just kind of stepping in, precision, doing some technical things. And then the last stage is adjourning. It's the stage where the group addresses how to end or how the group disbands, or you get them excited about the next thing. And then you go through the process again. And so part of Lead Smartly is a balance of knowing when to lead and knowing when not to lead when you're leading your team, when you're leading your group, right? Because there are certain stages in group development, and at different stages, you need a certain leadership and step back.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that storming is the most difficult stage, because as a swim coach, as soon as you started talking about that, man, that is so true, because that's when, as you said, personalities emerge. There's strong personality. There's people that are followers. There's people that push back because they don't really buy in. And you gotta, as a leader, you gotta deal with all of that. And so for me, every year we deal with each of these stages. For any leader, wherever you are, within your office or on the pool deck, or if you are doing a nonprofit or whatever it is, you really need to figure out where you're at in this process, because it's not like you just go through the stages once. If I hear you correctly, you have to continually go through them when you get new team members, new seasons, things like that.
You do new projects, right? New season, you do something
projects.
new.
Yeah.
Right. But then also as a leader, you might have a team doing a brand new project. So they're in the beginning stages of the group dynamics and group development, but you might be leading another team and they're in a different stage. You see what I'm saying? And so like if you're managing multiple teams in your organization, knowing where they're at and knowing the team dynamic there really kind of helps you. Okay, I need to assert my leadership here. I need to step back here because they got it and they're doing really good. Because as leaders, sometimes we can mess stuff up by leading. You know what I mean? By leading at the wrong time, you know? I think Microsoft is a good example of this. Like they would have a project like, you know, their next thing. This was years ago, right? Their next thing, they were going to launch a thing and they would have like, here's the deadline. And then they get to the deadline and then they would show a lawyer or an attorney or they would show the legal department something. They're like, oh, you can't do this. And then they would always go back to, you know, the beginning stages where you should have done all of that in the beginning stages. You know what I mean? Like it's cheapest when it's in the beginning because it's just paper. But once you have a product, then you have to go back. Like it just takes this. You've wasted money, you've wasted time. You know, like as a leader, knowing where they are in the process really kind of helps you with team dynamic, but it also can be, you know, it can also help you with the bottom line because you're not wasting money at the end, you know, when you should have done things at the beginning. So just really understanding group dynamic and group development really kind of helps you as a leader to know when to step in and when to step out.
So putting some legs on this approach within a team or an organization help my audience understand what what have you learned in using this approach before?
Sometimes teams can get stuck in stages. And so knowing exactly where they are in that stage really gives you insight into the type of leadership that team needs, right? I really need to assert myself. Maybe I just need to do something technical. Maybe I just need to have a conversation with this one team member. If they get stuck, maybe you stop the whole thing. You know, it's a morale boost thing that you have to do. Like just understanding that like you can't just go in there and just start do this, do this, do that, you know, because then you know, like that's one way to lead, but it's not, I think, the most effective way to lead. You really want to take care of your people you're leading. It's the kind of understanding just the nuance of, well, personality and what it is, team dynamic, it just kind of really helps you. It helps you as well personally because you, anytime you lead, you exert energy and you exert effort. Like it's tiring, right? But if you are leading and you're like jumping in there and leading really hard, but the team doesn't necessarily need that, you're just burning yourself out. So that's the other thing. There's a team dynamic thing, but then there's also development thing, a leadership development for the leader. Like I don't want to burn out in my leadership when I'm leading when they don't need me to lead. Does that make sense? Because then you know, I'm asserting leadership and exerting effort that isn't necessarily needed. And so you can capitalize on the energy of the vibe of the group, but you can also capitalize and conserve energy as a leader, you know, when you assert and then you step back. And so, you know, it's kind of keeping an eye on yourself as a leader and not burning out because I don't have to lead all the time. Yeah.
So what would you say for leaders with different personalities? So take for instance, both you and I have coached sports at all levels. You've coached
Yeah.
volleyball level, I've coached swimming at all levels. You and I
Yeah.
have very different personalities. We
Yeah.
have very different ways that we lead and coach. So how might this process look different or similar for leaders?
So I'll use the coaching, I'll give you a coaching story. I coached women's volleyball. I was assistant coach and the head coach, I mean, she was the head coach, right? And she led and I supported her leadership. But she was very like emotional, very extroverted, would throw like the clipboard down, you know, just, you know, was a very passionate leader. I wanted to support her by um they didn't need me to also be emotional and super passionate. Even though I was passionate, I had to kind of control my emotions so that I could support the girls. And so they would get yelled at, you know, and then I would watch and I would wait, and then I would come along and just quietly support the player. You know, this is what's happening, and just kind of emotionally support them quietly, you know, just to kind of help out the head coach. Does that make sense? And so some athletes can handle the yelling. You know what I mean? Some athletes can't handle the yelling. And sometimes you yell at the wrong athlete on the team, and it can bring the whole team down, you know? And so it's just watching the dynamics and like stepping in there to like, support and encourage those that kind of need it in the way that they need it in light of their personality.
Yeah, you mentioned that leaders who always try to lead, they risk burnout, and you just use that word burnout. And so, what strategies can leaders implement to avoid the constant leadership trap?
Yeah, back to Tuckman's model, when you know the group dynamic and what part of the cycle that they're in, it gives you insight to stepping back and not necessarily asserting and exerting yourself. When you understand what the group needs, it helps you to determine when to lead, right? And sometimes, the caveat is sometimes there are things that are going beyond me or going on in the personal lives. And there's some things that you just can't control. And in that case, it happens and you got to kind of go with it and roll with it. But to walk alongside, like I like using relational capital and I like to lead relationally. I don't just lead from a distance. I kind of want to know how the team's doing. I kind of want to know how they're feeling. I kind of want to know like, hey, what's happening in your life, so that because whatever's happening in their life translates on to the pool deck, it translates onto the field, the court, like whatever was happening at home really impacts their performance at work or on the team. And so really kind of understanding dynamics and where people are at helps me then to step in when I need to. But then also that's the key, to be able to step back when you're not needed as a leader. Because there's this empowering piece as a leader that you kind of want to do. If you're leading all the time, you're not really empowering other people to lead. You're just leading because you're the leader. Again, I think it's dumb. I think if you're going to lead smartly, empower people and engage people in their passions and in their excitement, so that they can also lead. I just think a leader that can do that um, will kind of protect themselves from burnout.
So burnout is real for a lot of leaders, and they they don't know how to balance smart leadership. So how can leaders recognize the warning signs of exhaustion, both for themselves but also their teams?
I mean, you're watching your emotions. As a leader, I don't know. Maybe I should do some thinking on this instead of writing on this. Watching people's emotions and leading really kind of helps you to see where they're at, there's a difference between being fired up because you're excited and you're ready to go and being fired up because you're tired. But I think keeping an eye on people's emotions is one of the ways that you can uh kind of guard yourself on with burnout. One like I'm not the most emotional person, and so I am not super aware of my emotions at times. But one of the things that I do is I check my heart rate on my watch, you know? So and I've done this. I'm in a meeting and things are getting heated and again, emotional. And when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to like take a step back. But like, I remember one time, like it was a heated conversation, but I felt fine. But I checked my heart rate and my heart rate was elevated. And I was like, oh man, my heart's beating really fast. So even though I don't feel super triggered or emotional, the watch doesn't lie. You know what I mean? And so it's like, for me, it's watching my emotions, it's watching my heart rate, it's really learning about like your rhythms, to kind of understand like, what are the warning signs that you're kind of hitting burnout, um, just curious, what is it for you? Like, do you have any kind of things that you watch or that you keep an eye on?
I think for me, uh, I never reached the point of exhaustion because I've been I was taught early on. Kevin really tamed that in me, and he would tell me, Mo, if you keep going at this rate, you're going to burn yourself out.
Yeah.
He sat down with me and some of these guys that I had in one of my leadership classes, and he essentially said, and people aren't going to want to hear this, he just said, I don't think you should get burned out because
Mm,
if you're doing the right things, then you'll know when to step back. And so, for instance, when I worked for him, I'll work 7 days a week. But Kevin he told me I had to choose a day because we worked at a church. So it's easy to work on Saturday and Sunday when there's services on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
And so he said, your day off, Mo, is not on Saturday. It's not on Sunday. So you need to choose a day. And so we came up with Thursday was our day off because Friday we were getting ready for the weekend. And Monday we were always talking about what just happened because we are a program-driven business.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, having that day off, sometimes it was hard to sit. But I needed that or else I would have gotten exhausted and I would have burned out. I've never burned out in leadership, in ministry. Good. And when I hear people say that and they talk about burnout, I get it. They burn out. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying if you get to that point, you did something wrong along the way and you got to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
When you say in your article that you shouldn't always be leading, you should be able to step back. How can leaders develop a self-awareness that's needed to know when their input is crucial and when it's not, when they should just step back?
I think part of that happens before any of the leadership happens, before you get in front of the team. I've seen leaders that want to lead and want to speak because they want to hear themselves speak, and they need to out of what's a nice way of saying it? They lead out of a lack in their life. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it. They lead out of a need for themselves, not for the team.
Insecurity?
You know what I mean? Yes, an insecurity. They definitely have an insecurity, and I've seen lots of leaders lead out of their insecurity as opposed to leading the team and helping the team. The insecure leader is the one that constantly needs to lead. And so doing the self-work, if you're a leader, doesn't mean that you're leading all the time. And so I think part of that self-awareness is to do that self-work ahead of time. If you have a mentor or a peer that can point out, yo, you got to chill out, that's always helpful.
Yeah, and I can attest to that because you have been one of those voices in my life over the last 25 years where you were like, Mo, you need to step back. The best mentors and coaches in my own life, they let me fail knowing that I would fail forward. They would never let me fail backwards. So for a leader, are there any practical exercises or reflections that you would recommend to help them improve their sense of timing?
Yeah, I think knowing Tuckman's model and understanding where the group or the team is in the development dynamic cycle really kind of helps. Another thing that I mean, just like as we mentioned, having the self-awareness and really understanding your development and your personality well enough to know where you're leading out of, whether that's an insecure place or secure place. That's the work, you got some work to do on that personal development side in order to be the leader. But I keep coming back to this. I think every conversation I keep coming back to, you need to write. You need to write it down. You need to reflect on it. You need to evaluate it. One of the most practical things that you can do after you write it down, then you go back and reflect on what was right. These are the questions I ask. What was right? What was wrong? What was missing? What was confused? Right. So then when I take a look at something that I've done in leadership, even a failure, even a success, what did I do right? I write these things down. What did I do wrong? Those are pretty easy to come off. And then what is missing? What was missing in my actions, in the words that I said, in the way that I communicated? What was missing? And then what was confused? Either I was rushing or I just wasn't clear. But what was confusing in the way that I communicated led? What was right? What was wrong? What was missing? Is what was confused? Yes, that's how I kind of evaluate leadership practice. And so, those are some of the things that I do to help me reflect and evaluate my leadership.
So in your article, you write that sometimes the truly effective leadership can be invisible. So can you elaborate on the long-term benefits of quiet or invisible style of leadership?
So long-term, I think you need to help your team develop their leadership. And if you're talking all the time, if you're leading all the time, it's hard to observe them in their leadership. It's hard to help them know what it is that they need to change or tweak because you haven't thought through how can I help this team member? How can I help my team develop? But then also, if you let them lead, you develop them as leaders. If I am leading all the time and I'm leading out of my insecurity, I think I really like that idea. You never give your team the opportunity to step up and lead. You never really empower your team to perform at the highest levels because you're the one needing to do it. Does that make sense? So, I think the quiet, taking a step back, helped me to then develop my leadership. If you were coaching and you were talking the entire time as you were coaching, when would you write stuff down? When would you actually, you're not even thinking about, you know, the technical aspects of how you can help somebody. You should be yelling at them, just, and you don't ever take that step back to help consider, okay, how can I help my team or this team member develop?
So talking about those considerations, then what's the balance to be visibly engaged with the team and the need to empower others to operate independently to do stuff on their own?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One, when you understand the group dynamics and development and that Tuckman's model, you know which team member needs to be empowered and which can operate independently. And some might not be there and you need to stay on them and that's when you assert leadership to kind of help them develop. And so again, using this model and using that team group dynamic really kind of gives you insight into where and when and who to lead. Some members of the team will lead the vision and then you just let them go, right? Some of them just are leaders and um they have like leadership ability and if you just can give them the vision, then they can take off, which then is your part in the leadership is just giving vision. You know what I mean? And understanding that like that's how I best lead the team really helps you to be effective as a leader. It's not like I have to cast vision and then I have to help them with the technical stuff and then I have to encourage them. Like, you're not burning yourself out. You're just knowing where to step in. Okay. Then some team members might just lead against you, right? They might challenge you in your leadership for whatever reason, and you might not have the support of team member, you might not have the support of board, and in that case, there's nothing you can do, and it's time to leave, right? It's just not a good situation to be in for you, and it happens, right? It's happened to me, so understanding that no matter how well a leader you are, if they don't like you and they don't want you, then you know you should leave. And then the last insight that I want to give is constant communication is needed, right? To have team meetings, to have the individual effectiveness of team members, it's all part of developing that leadership culture where you know how they're doing and you know what's going on in their personal lives so that you can know why something impacts their performance, right? Um, if there's a leadership culture or actually a gossip culture, and there are power plays, then it just leads to this toxic culture, and it's not a leadership culture. And the best thing again to do is to get out. That's another way to avoid burnout. To kind of like leave that toxic culture. Sometimes in some situations, the culture it's just not a leadership culture. Sometimes the head coach just doesn't care to lead necessarily. And the best thing for you to do is to get out of that situation. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like having the awareness to know this is what I can do and this is how I can help. And then understanding, okay, it's time to go because no matter how good a leader I am, and no matter how great the vision is, if they're not into it, then you need to get out. So, just keeping those things in mind kind of help.
So you emphasize the role of humility and security in leadership. So what advice would you give to our leaders who struggle with insecurity and the need to prove themselves constantly? Because you mentioned that a little bit before,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sometimes we lead when we really shouldn't be. So what about those leaders?
So I think all leaders need to go through this development process, and some leaders never grow out of it. And so there's a place for insecure leaders. Does that make sense? Like they can still lead and they can still be effective in the team, but like put them in the place where they're most effective. Typically, you don't put them at the top because you don't really need an insecure leader at the top. But if you struggle with insecurity, then Um, the leader or the mentor needs to help develop their sense of self. You know, back to what I was saying earlier. If you're an insecure leader, then you got some self work that you need to do. You got some um development work that you need to do on your character, on your sense of being, and then your leadership will flow out of your maturity. Your leadership will flow out of your continued development. The idea is you learn out of who you are. And so if you're insecure leader, like we were saying earlier, then you're leading all the time because your insecurity is driving you. But the more you develop, your leadership ability, the more you develop personally, the more secure you are in who you are. You lead that way. It's a comfortable leadership place because you don't have to lead all the time. You are then in a position where you can empower others to lead, and it's a pretty amazing place to be.
So let's say these leaders take your advice, become secure in their leadership. How does developing this security in your leadership style contribute to a healthy organizational culture?
Well, like we were saying, a secure leader will develop a leadership culture. One time I went to this church and I was asked to be there for the summer just to kind of help them understand and just to kind of help the lead pastor in his leadership. He said, "Come and sit in meetings and help me to develop my leadership." And I watched and I observed. I went to a bunch of meetings, and one of the things that I told him was, "You don't have a leadership culture around here," which he kind of like snapped back and said, "But we got a lot of leaders here." And I was like, "That's not what I said. You may have a lot of leaders in your organization, but you don't have a leadership culture that empowers leaders to lead." And so, a secure leader um, can create a leadership culture. A secure leader will empower their team where they don't have to lead all the time. A secure leader will equip and establish a team that can work well together. So I think a secure leader can pick the right people in the right role so that they can work well together. A secure leader will not have to lead all the time, right? Because if you're empowering people to lead, even as a leader, then as a secure leader, you're going to have the security to allow other people to lead so that you don't necessarily have to. And then you can kind of step back. And I think that's a healthy leadership culture.
So, I'm a big process guy. I'm all about the process. And so, when
Well,
we talk about the process of leading smartly, it's not static. So, how can leaders stay adaptive and continue to grow in this area?
if you're leading smartly, which I'm meaning to not have to lead all the time, then you'll have the energy and you'll be healthy. And health takes work. Humility takes work. And the more you lead, the more health and humility will be required of you. And if you don't pay attention to these things, you'll burn out. And then that's dumb leadership. So leading smartly requires attention to your health and to your humility, doing the self work that you need to do, working with a mentor, working with a coach to kind of help you in your leadership development and your leadership style. And then having the humility to listen, having the humility to not have to lead all the time kind of helps you to lead smartly. It kind of helps you to continue to develop a leadership culture because I really don't think a leader hits like the pinnacle and then you don't have to develop any longer. I mean, like I look at like John Maxwell, I just watched a video of him. He's still learning. He's still constantly learning. The world is changing. The culture is changing, and he is adapting and continually learning. He's placing himself in a humble position to continue to learn so that he can continue to help other leaders develop. And so we never hit the pinnacle of leadership. I don't think we're going to constantly be developing and getting better and better. And I think the more secure you are in a leader, the more healthy you'll be, the more humble you'll be.
Yeah. So, what are the resources or the habits that have helped you during the leadership journey as you've learned how to lead smartly?
We're always learning and leaders are constantly developing. Writing down my goals for the week and evaluating that process helps me to maintain my adaptability. Change is constant and just writing stuff down and evaluating and going back and forth and reflecting really kind of helps me to do this. But I think But I think one of the things that you keep bringing up is read and learn and consume the content. One of the things that I just read and I'm just learning is this idea of having psychological flexibility and psychological rigidity. So psychological flexibility is about having the choice at any moment to behave and lead in a way that you choose, right? Psychological rigidity is more an autonomic reaction born out of trauma and unhealth, right? And so at every moment in my leadership, am I reacting to it or do I have the presence of mind and the ability to choose? There are several options and I'm going to choose this one. I'm not reacting. I think I think leaders that react is unhealthy, because it's again born out of trauma, born out of insecurity. And I want to lead smartly. And I think leading smartly is leading out of health, it's leading out of humility. And so I'm learning about that. As I reflect on my leadership, I think how many times in leadership did I just react to the situation and I didn't think about it? That's psychological rigidity. I was just reacting to the situation. And sometimes it worked out, but a lot of times it didn't work out because I didn't think through it. And just taking the pause and having that opportunity and that psychological flexibility to take a moment so that you can make the right decision and make the best decision that you can make, like really can help you do that. And then again, I'm still reflecting on my leadership, um, and reflecting back on things that I did, the things that I've done, decisions that I've made, and how can I um, evaluate what was happening in that situation so that I can make a better decision next time I'm in that situation. Again, leaders don't react. Leaders are purposeful in their actions. An unhealthy leader will react, and it takes time to return to health and the ability to have that psychological flexibility to choose how to act in whatever moment that you're in where they need you to lead.
So, what are your final thoughts for leading smartly? How do I move to the next level in the process of leading smartly?
We're all on the journey, no matter where you're at as a leader. You could be leading the biggest companies and you're still on the journey. And I think what we've been talking about is this external leadership that you're doing, the things that people see. But then there's also this internal leadership. How are you leading yourself? It's one thing to lead other people and have the ability and the position to lead other people. To lead yourself to health, to lead yourself out of insecurity and into security, to lead yourself out of unhealth to health, like that, it takes a lot of work and it takes time. A mentor really helps. Writing really helps. Reading really helps. Reflecting on what the emotions were when you were leading and when you were doing the thing really kind of helps. And so, you know, the insight is there's the external thing that people see, but the internal thing, the leading yourself, that's work that you have to do. And have you done that work in order to develop your leadership?
Man, I love it. I mean, what a great article. And so, as we continue on this journey of 50 leadership lessons with Dr. Lem, I would encourage you, wherever you're at in your journey, just remember you got to take one step at a time. And so, Lem, thanks for sharing again with us
Yeah.
today.
Thank you so much
These
for having
nuggets,
me, man.
man.
Yep.
You got it, brother.
Yeah.
We're excited for the journey. So, I hope that my audience, all you guys out there, are excited as well. But until next time, always remember to lead well. Dr. Lem, thanks so much, brother.
Thank you so much.